The Valorian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of silver daggers, each ship gleaming with polished alloy that caught the distant sunlight and reflected it in blinding flashes across the void of. Space Admiral Kethvara stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching Earth grow larger on the main view screen with something approaching boredom in his three eyes. This would be conquest number 48 for the Valorian Empire, and by far the least impressive the tactical display showed. Earth's so-called defense fleet assembling a ragged formation near the moon, and Kethvara had to suppress the clicking sound his species made when amused. What he saw before him was not a military force, but a collection of orbital garbage. The human flagship, which his intelligence officers informed him was called the Indomitable, looked like someone had welded together 3 different ships from 3 different centuries and then added random parts wherever they would fit. Hull plates of mismatched colors covered the vessel like a patchwork quilt. Exposed conduits ran along the exterior like mechanical intestines, and the weapons arrays appeared to have been bolted on as an afterthought. Commander Threx, magnify Section 7 of the human flagship, Kethvara ordered. The image zoomed in to show what appeared to be actual duct tape holding together a section of the ship's outer plating. Several officers on the command deck made the clicking sound now, unable to contain themselves. This is what passes for military engineering among these primitives, Threx asked, his voice dripping with disdain. They have been in space for less than 300 of their years. Another officer reported, most species we encounter have at least 1,000 years of spacefaring experience. Kethvara studied the rest of the human fleet with growing contempt. There were converted mining vessels with drill arrays still attached, cargo haulers that had been fitted with primitive missile launchers, and what appeared to be an actual space station that someone had attached engine blocks to and called a warship. The largest human vessel after the Indomitable looked like it had been assembled from the wreckage of a dozen different ships, each component clearly visible and distinct from its neighbors. Open a channel to the human homeworld, Kethvara commanded. Let us begin the formalities. The communication officer worked his console, and within moments, the view screen split to show the bridge of the human flagship alongside a view of Earth below. A human female stood at the center of the Indomitable's bridge, wearing a dark blue uniform with silver insignia on the shoulders. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her face showed no emotion as she regarded the Valorian admiral. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Fleet, she said, her voice calm and steady. You are in violation of Earth's sovereign space. Kethvara allowed himself a full clicking laugh now, the sound echoing through his command deck. Sovereign space? He repeated, child species, you have no concept of sovereignty in a galaxy ruled by powers beyond your comprehension. He gestured broadly at the Valorian fleet surrounding his flagship. Over 200 vessels of various classes, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. I am Admiral Kethvara of the Valorian Empire, conqueror of 47 species across 200 systems. Your primitive vessels are an insult to the very concept of naval warfare. That collection of scrap metal you call a defense fleet would not survive 5 minutes against a single one of our corvettes on the split screen. Kethvara could see the human bridge more clearly. Now the walls were covered in exposed wiring. Several consoles appeared to be held together with metal clamps and what looked like adhesive tape, and one section of the ceiling had a visible patch welded over what must have been a hull breach. The crew members visible in the background wore uniforms that did not all match, and their equipment looked equally improvised. You have 24 of your Earth hours to surrender unconditionally, Kethvara continued. Deliver your planetary governments, your military command structures, and your industrial capacity to Valorian control. Failure to comply will result in the systematic destruction of your orbital infrastructure. followed by surgical strikes on your major population centers. Resistance is not merely futile, it is pathetic. Captain Chun's expression did not change. She stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back, and when she spoke, her voice carried the same calm tone as before. Admiral Kethvara, your threats are noted and rejected. Earth will not surrender to you or any other hostile force. We may not have your advanced technology or your centuries of military experience, but we have something you clearly lack: the will to defend our home with everything we have. Kethvara clicked in amusement again. Everything you have? I have seen everything you have, Captain. Civilian vessels with guns taped to them, mining equipment pretending to be warships, and that absurd flagship of yours that looks like it might fall apart if we simply waited long enough. He leaned forward in his command chair. Tell me, Captain, what is that material holding together your hull plates? Is that actually adhesive tape? Several human crew members on the Indomitable's bridge shifted uncomfortably, but Captain Chun remained perfectly composed. We use whatever materials are effective for the task at hand. Admiral, perhaps your species prefers form over function, but we focus on results. 24 hours, Kethvara repeated, waving a dismissive hand. Use that time to come to terms with reality. Your scrap heap fleet against the might of the Valorian Empire is not a battle. It is a massacre waiting to happen. I am giving you this opportunity to surrender because destroying such primitive opponents brings no honor to Valorian warriors. Make the wise choice. The transmission ended, and Kethvara settled back in his command chair with satisfaction. Commander Threx approached from his station. Sir, should we begin positioning our forces for the assault? No rush, Commander, Kethvara replied. Let the humans stew in their fear for a while. Begin detailed scans of their major cities and industrial centers. When they refuse to surrender, and they will, these primitive species always choose defiance over wisdom initially. I want to make our first strikes count. Disable their capacity to resist with minimal effort. As the Valorian fleet settled into a holding pattern around Earth's orbital space, Kethvara pulled up the tactical analysis his computers had compiled on the human vessels. Every readout confirmed what his eyes had already told him. Outdated reactor designs, inefficient weapon systems, mismatched shield generators that likely interfered with each other, and structural integrity that rated below even civilian Valorian Standards 1. Report noted that the human flagship's main cannon appeared to be composed of 3 separate weapon systems linked together in series, a design so fundamentally flawed that Valorian engineers had abandoned it over a millennium ago. Another analysis highlighted that the human vessels lacked any standardization whatsoever. Each ship used different power systems, different weapons, different everything. It was chaos pretending to be a military force. Kethvara made a mental note to recommend that the Empire skip the usual integration period with this species. Humans clearly had nothing to offer Valorian civilization except perhaps a cautionary tale about the dangers of premature spaceflight on Earth below and aboard the battered human fleet above. Captain Sarah Chun stood before her senior officers in the cramped briefing room of the Indomitable. The walls hummed with the sound of overtaxed generators, and the lighting flickered occasionally when someone activated a high-power system elsewhere on the ship. The Valorians have given us 24 hours, she said quietly, so we have 24 hours to show them why underestimating humanity is the last mistake they'll ever make. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the ship's chief engineer, grinned despite the grim situation. Captain, the trap is ready. Every system, every mismatched panel, every piece of duct tape, it's all exactly where we need it to be. Chun allowed herself a small smile. Then let's give the Valorian Empire a lesson in human ingenuity. They think we're primitives flying junk. Let's show them what happens when you mistake adaptation for incompetence. The Valorian fleet maintained its blockade formation around Earth, confident and patient while their 24-hour deadline ticked down with mechanical precision aboard their ships. Valorian warriors ran standard pre-conquest drills, checked their weapon systems with casual efficiency, and made bets on how quickly the human fleet would crumble once actual combat began. Most estimates range from 5 to 15 minutes, what the Valorians could not see. Hidden within the seemingly chaotic construction of humanity's fleet was the feverish activity taking place on every human vessel. Indomitable's engineering deck was a controlled storm of motion and noise. Dr. Marcus Webb moved through the cramped corridors like a conductor leading an orchestra, checking readouts, shouting instructions, and occasionally smacking a recalcitrant piece of equipment with a wrench until it cooperated. Status on Reactor 3? He called out to a team working inside an access tunnel. Running hot but stable, came the muffled reply. We've got it chained to Reactors 1 and 2, just like you specified. When we fired the main gun, all 3 will dump everything they have into the capacitor banks. Webb nodded with satisfaction. The weapon the Valorians had, mockingly identified as 3 separate systems linked together, was exactly that, but not because humans did not know better. It was because 3 nuclear reactors, overclocked beyond any sane safety limit and chained together, could produce a power surge that would turn the railgun into something no Valorian shield had ever been designed to stop. He moved to the next station, where a young ensign was performing final checks on what the crew had nicknamed the ablative patchwork. How's our beautiful disaster looking? Webb asked. The ensign grinned. Sir, every mismatched hull plate is positioned perfectly. The Valorians will target what they think are weak point seams between different materials, areas with visible damage, sections held together with external reinforcement. What they don't know is that every single one of those weak points is actually a reflective panel designed to scatter directed energy weapons. Webb clapped him on the shoulder. And the duct tape? Actually holding together a secondary power coupling, the ensign admitted. But it's doing its job. And it made the Valorians laugh, so I call that a win in the Indomitable's wardroom. Captain Chun briefed the other ship commanders via secure holographic link. 23 faces appeared around the table, each one representing a vessel in Earth's defense fleet. The Valorians think we're stupid. Chun began without preamble. They think we built these ships out of desperation and ignorance. Let them keep thinking that. Commander Rodriguez of the Murphy's Law, a converted cargo hauler covered in improvised armor plating, leaned forward. Captain, my crew has been asking about the plan. They know we're outgunned and outnumbered. What do I tell them? Tell them the truth, Chun replied. We are outgunned, every single Valorian ship has more firepower than 3 of ours combined. Their shields are stronger. Their hulls are tougher. Their weapons are more advanced. In a fair fight, we lose in minutes. The faces around the table grew somber. So we don't fight fair, Chun continued. And now she smiled. We fight human. She activated a display showing technical schematics of Valorian vessels for the past 100 years. Every time humanity found wreckage from ancient space battles, every time we encountered abandoned alien technology, every time we met another species and traded for their equipment, we did not just copy what we found. We adapted it. We took Kryn shield generators and modified them to work with human power systems. We found Thalaxian weapons and rebuilt them to use our ammunition. We salvaged Valorian engine components from their own wrecks and reverse engineered their propulsion technology. Dr. Webb appeared in a smaller window on the display. Every ship in our fleet is unique, he explained. The Valorians built elegant vessels with standardized systems across their entire navy. It makes their logistics easier, their repairs faster, their coordination smoother. It also means they all share the same vulnerabilities. One electromagnetic pulse signature that disables Valorian shields will disable all Valorian shields. One virus that corrupts their tactical network will spread through their entire fleet. One weapon frequency that penetrates their armor will work on every ship they have. He gestured to a schematic of the Indomitable. Our ships? Everyone is different. The Indomitable uses Kryn shields, Thalaxian weapons, human reactors, and Valorian engines. The Murphy's Law has completely different systems. The Orbital Mule uses mining lasers we converted into cutting beams. The Valorians will have to figure out how to kill each of us individually, and by the time they do, we'll have already adapted again. Captain Chun stood. We have 17 hours until the deadline. Use that time to run final checks on every system, every weapon, every trick we have planned. Make sure your crews understand the battle plan. We scatter on my signal. And after that, it's controlled chaos. Every ship fights independently, using whatever tactics work for your specific configuration. The Valorians expect us to fight like they do organized, coordinated, predictable. Instead, we're going to hit them like a swarm of angry wasps, each one coming from a different angle with a different sting. Commander Rodriguez grinned. Now that sounds like a fight worth having. Across Earth's orbital space, human crews worked through the night on the Orbital Mule, a former mining vessel now designated as a combat ship. Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez oversaw the installation of what her captain had called the dumbest idea that might actually work. The entire ship was being converted into a massive bomb fusion warheads packed every available space, wired together with timer systems and deadman switches. The plan was simple and insane. Get disabled by Valorian fire, drift toward an enemy ship as if dead in space, and then detonate when close enough to take the enemy with them. Martinez had volunteered for the assignment. As had every member of the Orbital Mule's crew, they were mining specialists, not soldiers. But they understood the mathematics of the situation. Earth needed every advantage it could create. And sometimes, the best advantage was a well-placed explosion on the research station Galileo, now fitted with engines and missile batteries. A team of civilian scientists worked on humanity's secret weapon. Dr. Jennifer Harrison typed rapidly on her console, strings of code flowing across multiple screens. The WASP virus is ready, she announced to her team. Widespread Adaptive System Penetrator. I still think we should have called it something more intimidating. Her colleague, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, shook his head. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that we spent 2 years analyzing every piece of Valorian technology we could find. Every communication protocol, every software architecture. This virus won't take control of their systems. That would be too obvious, too easy to detect. Instead, it will introduce tiny delays and small errors, a targeting solution that takes 0.3 seconds longer to calculate, a sensor reading that's off by 2%, a communication that gets routed through one extra relay. Harrison nodded. Multiply those tiny problems across a fleet of 200 ships, all trying to coordinate with each other, and their advantage in organization becomes a liability. They'll be fighting ghosts while we hit them from unexpected angles. Back on the Indomitable, Captain Chun stood alone in her quarters, looking out the small viewport at Earth below. Her homeworld turned slowly beneath her, blue and white and beautiful. Completely unaware of the battle that would soon determine its fate, she thought about the Valorian admiral's mocking laughter, his contempt for human engineering, his absolute certainty that this would be an easy conquest. Kath Vara had made the fatal mistake of judging humanity by appearance. Rather than capability, he saw duct tape and mismatched hull plates, and assumed incompetence. Did not understand that humans had learned to survive by being adaptable, by using whatever tools were available, by turning limitations into advantages. The Valorians had conquered 47 species with their superior technology and military precision, but they had never fought a species that treated warfare like engineering. Problem to be solved with creativity and controlled. Madnishchin's communicator chimed. Captain, this is Webb. All systems are green. The trap is set. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Good. Chum replied. Get some rest. In 16 hours, we're going to teach the Valorian Empire why you should never underestimate a species desperate enough, creative enough, and crazy enough to weaponize their own wreckage. Throughout the human fleet, similar conversations took place. Crews said goodbye to loved ones on Earth via recorded messages, checked and rechecked their equipment, and prepared themselves mentally for a battle that would be remembered for generations. If anyone survived to remember it, the Valorians, confident in their superiority, began powering up their weapon systems as the deadline approached. Admiral Kethvara expected the humans to surrender at the last moment, as most primitive species did when faced with overwhelming force. He had already prepared the occupation protocols and designated which human cities would serve as administrative centers for Valorian rule. What he did not expect, what he could not have anticipated, was that humanity's greatest weapon was not any particular technology or tactic. It was the fundamental human refusal to accept that something was impossible just because it had never been done before. The 24-hour deadline expired with mechanical precision, and Admiral Kethvara settled into his command chair with the satisfaction of a predator about to feast. The humans have not responded to our final warning, Commander Threx reported. No surrender. No communication. No indication they understand the futility of resistance. Kethvara clicked his approval. Then we proceed with the demonstration. All ships advance to attack formation. Target their flagship and the 12 largest vessels. Disable their engines and weapons systems, but leave the crews alive. I want them to watch as we dismantle their pathetic defense fleet piece by piece. The Valorian Armada moved forward like a school of silver predators, each ship sliding into its designated position with practiced precision. Their formation was beautiful in its geometric perfection, overlapping fields of fire, mutual shield coverage, coordinated targeting solutions. It was the product of thousands of years of military evolution, refined across dozens of conquests on the Indomitable's bridge. Captain Chun watched the approaching Valorian fleet with calm focus. All ships, execute scatter protocol, she ordered quietly. Make it look panicked across Earth's orbital space. The human fleet erupted into apparent chaos. Ships broke formation in wild vectors, engines firing at random angles, some vessels appearing to collide with each other before veering away at the last moment. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels, shouts of panic, contradictory orders, pleas for coordination that looked exactly like an inexperienced fleet falling apart under pressure. Commander Threx watched the human response with satisfaction. Sir, they're breaking formation. Our psychological warfare appears to have been effective. They're panicking. Excellent. Kethvara replied. Vanguard Squadron, you may engage. Clean shots to their engine cores. Show them how Valorian precision looks. 20 Valorian destroyers accelerated forward, their lance beams charging with a distinctive whine that had become the last sound 47 conquered species had heard before their fleets fell. The targeting computers locked onto the human vessels with mechanical certainty, calculating exact points where a concentrated energy beam would surgically destroy a ship's propulsion system without breaching the crew compartments. The destroyers fired in synchronized sequence, 20 beams of concentrated energy crossing the void toward their targets on the Indomitable. Dr. Webb watched his sensor displays with intense concentration. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The Valorian lance beams struck the human ships exactly where intended, hitting what appeared to be vulnerable sections of hull plating where different materials had been welded together instead of punching through to the engine cores. The beams scattered. The mismatched hull plates the Valorians had mocked were not signs of poor construction, but carefully positioned ablative panels. Made from salvaged reflective materials, each panel was composed of different alloys, each one designed to diffuse energy weapons in a different way. The Valorian beams hit surfaces that refracted, and dispersed their energy into harmless patterns of light and heat. Their weapons are ineffective against our ablative patchwork, Webb announced with grim satisfaction. All ships report minimal damage. Return fire. Captain Chun's voice cut through the communication channels. All vessels. Execute firing solution Alpha. Show them what human engineering looks like. The Indomitable and 3 sister ships fired simultaneously. Their main weapons were the ungainly railgun systems the Valorians had dismissed as primitive 3 nuclear reactors per ship, overclocked beyond any sane safety limit, chained together to dump their combined output into a single massive capacitor bank. The result was a hypervelocity kinetic weapon that accelerated solid tungsten rods to 0.3% of light speed. The Valorians had designed their shields to dissipate energy weapons, particle beams, lasers, plasma bursts. They had never considered that a species might still use projectile weapons at relativistic velocities. The tungsten rods crossed the distance between fleets in seconds. 4 Valorian destroyers vanished in balls of fire as the kinetic projectiles punched through their shields like tissue paper and detonated their antimatter cores. The elegant formation shattered as ships scattered to avoid debris on the Eternal Dominion's bridge. Alarm klaxons wailed. Commander Threx stared at his tactical display in shock. Sir, we've lost 4 destroyers. Their weapons, they're using kinetic projectiles. Our shields are not calibrated to stop solid matter moving at those velocities. Kefvar's expression transformed from smug confidence to focused anger. How is that possible? Kinetic weapons are primitive technology. They're inefficient, inaccurate, and easy to defend against at range, except when they're moving at relativistic speeds, Threx replied grimly. Sir, we need to recalibrate our defensive systems. All ships. Emergency shield modulation, Kethvara ordered. Adapt to kinetic threat parameters. Drone squadrons. Advance and overwhelm their point defense. Cruiser groups. Prepare particle bombardment. We end this now. But as the Valorian fleet regrouped and prepared their counterattack, the human ships were already adapting again. A converted mining vessel, the Orbital Mule, appeared to take a direct hit from Valorian return fire. Its engines went dark. Atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches, and the ship began drifting on its last trajectory, directly toward a Valorian heavy cruiser. Sir, one of the human vessels has been disabled, a Valorian tactical officer reported. It's on a collision course with the cruiser Dominant Strike. Should they move to avoid? Kethvara studied the drifting human ship. It was clearly dead in space, posing no threat. Negative. Have Dominant Strike deploy a tractor beam and capture the vessel. We'll examine their primitive technology up close. The Valorian cruiser extended its tractor beam, catching the Orbital Mule and beginning to pull it into its hangar bay on the Mule's bridge. Chief Engineer Martinez and her skeleton crew watched their countdown timer tick toward 0. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was one way. The ship had been packed with every fusion warhead Earth's defense forces could spare, wired together with deadman switches and timer systems. 30 seconds to optimal detonation range, Martinez announced quietly. All hands. It's been an honor. Her crew nodded silently, each one making peace with their decision. They were miners, not soldiers, but they understood that sometimes the best weapon was a well-placed Explosion delivered by people willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. The orbital mule drifted into the Dominant Strike's hangar bay. The Valorian crew approached the disabled human vessel cautiously, scanning for survivors and preparing to breach the hull. The timer reached 0. The explosion consumed the Dominant Strike from the inside out. The combined fury of 37 fusion warheads, detonating simultaneously in the confined space of a Valorian hangar. The cruiser's shields, designed to protect against external threats, did nothing to contain the internal catastrophe. The Dominant Strike shattered like glass, debris expanding outward in a sphere of superheated metal. 2 Valorian frigates that had been maintaining close formation were caught in the blast, their shields overloaded by the unexpected proximity detonation. 3 Valorian ships destroyed by what they had dismissed as a disabled hull. Captain Chen watched the explosion blossom on her display and allowed herself a moment of silence for Martinez and her crew. Mark the orbital mule has fallen with honor, she said quietly. They gave us the opening we needed. All ships. The Valorians are off balance. Press the attack. The Murphy's Law, commanded by the reckless Commander Rodriguez, executed a maneuver the Valorian tactical doctrine classified as impossible, using Earth's moon as a gravity assist. Rodriguez swung his ship around the lunar surface at velocities that should have torn the converted cargo hauler apart. His entire crew wore mechanized exoskeletons, riding out G-forces that would have killed unprotected humans, while the ship's weapons fired in 3 directions simultaneously. The Valorians had never encountered a species that would deliberately subject their own crews to potentially lethal force in order to gain a tactical advantage. Rodriguez did not care about doctrine or safety margins. He cared about killing as many Valorian ships as possible before his own vessel fell apart from the stress. The Murphy's Law screamed around the moon's far side and emerged on a ballistic trajectory that brought it directly through a Valorian carrier group. Rodriguez's gunners, fighting to maintain consciousness against the crushing G-forces, fired every weapon the ship had: missiles, railgun projectiles, converted mining lasers, and improvised explosive packages launched in a continuous stream. The Valorian carrier group scattered, but 3 support vessels were too slow. They vanished in overlapping explosions as Rodriguez's wild attack run crippled their formation. Then, the Murphy's Law began to come apart. The structural stress from the gravity assist maneuver finally exceeded what even human over-engineering could compensate for. Hull plates peeled away, entire sections separated from the main body, and Rodriguez gave the order to abandon ship escape pods launched in every direction, each one carrying crew members in their exoskeletons. Valorians assumed the battle was over for those survivors. They were wrong. Admiral Kethvar's 3 eyes narrowed as he processed the impossible situation unfolding before him. His fleet, which had never failed in 47 conquests, was being pushed back by primitive vessels held together with what appeared to be construction adhesive. "This is unacceptable," he snarled. "Deploy all drone squadrons. Launch the heavy bombardment. Wings, bring the planet crackers to bear. I want this pathetic excuse for a fleet reduced to atoms." Commander Threx hesitated. "Sir, the planet crackers are designed for orbital bombardment of worlds. Using them against individual ships is... I am aware of their designed purpose." "Commander," Kethvara interrupted coldly, "I am also aware that we have lost 17 ships to a force we were supposed to annihilate in minutes. Deploy everything. I want overwhelming firepower. Show these humans what the Valorian Empire does to species that refuse to accept their place." Across the Valorian fleet, hangar bays opened like the mouths of mechanical beasts. Thousands of autonomous drone fighters poured into space, Each one a sleek predator armed with plasma cannons and guided by artificial intelligence, refined through centuries of warfare. Behind them came the heavy bombardment wings, massive ships designed to reduce planetary surfaces to molten slag. Their particle beam arrays charging with power that could crack continents. The Valorians unleashed the full fury that had broken 47 civilizations on the Indomitable's bridge. Alarms wailed as sensors registered the massive deployment. "Captain, we're detecting over 3,000 drone fighters inbound," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight with stress. "Multiple heavy bombardment vessels are powering up planet cracker weapons. Energy signatures are off the scale." Captain Chun stood calmly amid the chaos, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "All ships, execute swarm doctrine. Break into component units. Show them what happens when you try to swat wasps with a sledgehammer across the human fleet." Ships that had already appeared chaotic and disorganized now became something that defied all military logic. Vessels split apart into smaller sections. Cargo containers detached and activated independent thrusters, becoming gun platforms that tumbled through space on unpredictable vectors. Damaged human ships vented atmosphere and debris. But the clouds of material they released were not random. They were carefully calculated fields of shrapnel, metal fragments, and frozen oxygen that would shred anything passing through them at high velocity. The human formation, if it could even be called that, transformed into hundreds of individual units, each one moving independently, each one a unique threat. The Valorian drone fighters, programmed to engage enemy vessels in coordinated attack patterns, found themselves unable to predict target movements. Their artificial intelligence had been trained on thousands of battles against organized fleets. It had no template for dealing with an enemy that fought like a swarm of insects, chaotic, adaptable, and seemingly suicidal in their willingness to use any tactic that might work. Drones that attempted to pursue human gun platforms through debris clouds were shredded by the improvised shrapnel fields. Those that tried to engage the scattered human vessels found that their plasma weapons were less effective against targets tumbling through space on random vectors. Constant movement made precision targeting nearly impossible. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, commanding one of the Indomitable's detached cargo sections, grinned fiercely as her improvised gun platform spun through space. Her vessel was literally a shipping container with thrusters welded to one end and a railgun mounted on the other. She had no shields, minimal armor, and her life support would run out in 6 hours. But she had a weapon, attitude thrusters, and the targeting skills she had developed in years of shooting asteroids for mining surveys. "Come on, you beautiful mechanical bastards," she muttered, watching 3 Valorian drones approach her position. "Let's see how your fancy AI handles." Drunk tumbling cargo container. She fired her thrusters in a pattern that sent her container into a wild spin. The railgun pointed in seemingly random directions. The drone's targeting computers tried to calculate her trajectory and failed. There was no trajectory, just chaos at the apex of one rotation. Kim fired the tungsten rod, caught the lead drone dead center and vaporized it before the other 2 could react. She vented her remaining oxygen supply, using the explosive decompression to alter her vector completely. The drones fired at where she had been. Kim was already somewhere else, laughing like a maniac as she lined up her next shot across the battlefield. Hundreds of similar engagements unfolded. The Valorian drone swarms, designed to overwhelm organized resistance through numerical superiority, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to be organized. Every human unit fought differently, used different tactics, exploited different advantages. Dr. Webb, still aboard the Indomitable's engineering section, coordinated what he called the beautiful disaster of humanity's defense. "Attention all units," he broadcast. Valorian drones are having trouble with debris fields. Anyone with venting capability. Create more obstacles. Make them work for every kilometer of space. Human vessels responded by deliberately damaging themselves venting fuel, ejecting spent ammunition casings, even jettisoning non-essential equipment. The space between Earth and the Valorian fleet became a maze of floating debris, each piece a potential hazard for the fast-moving drone fighters, the Valorian heavy bombardment ships. Meanwhile, were discovering their own problems. Their planet cracker weapons were designed to hit large, stationary targets, continents, cities, orbital platforms, trying to use them against small, fast-moving human vessels was like trying to kill flies with artillery the particle beams fired. Crossing space with devastating power, most missed entirely. Their targeting solutions unable to track the erratically moving human units. Those that did connect destroyed their targets utterly. But each shot required minutes to recharge, and in those minutes, human forces adapted and scattered further Commander Rodriguez, now commanding his escape pod like a tiny warship, watched a Valorian bombardment beam miss his position. By less than a kilometer, the near miss was close. Enough that the electromagnetic pulse from the weapon overloaded his pod systems temporarily. That was too close, his co-pilot muttered. Rodriguez grinned. Too close is not the same as close enough. Activate the shape charge. We're going after that bombardment ship. His co-pilot stared at him. Sir, we're in an escape pod. That's a capital ship. It's got armor thicker than our entire pod. Yeah, but it also just fired its main weapon and needs 3 minutes to recharge. Rodriguez countered, and we've got one shape charge designed to punch through asteroid shells. I'm betting their sensor arrays are less armored than an asteroid. You're insane. I prefer tactically creative, Rodriguez replied, firing his pod's thrusters toward the massive Valorian vessel across the battlefield. Other human crews were having similar, tactically creative ideas. An engineer named Jackson, commanding a detached section of a mining vessel, realized that Valorian ships were using active sensor sweeps to track human positions. He deactivated everything power, life support, weapons, and drifted like dead debris directly toward a Valorian cruiser. The cruiser's sensors focused on tracking active threats. Dismissed the powerless hull section as battle damage. Jackson floated to within 500 meters before reactivating his systems and firing the mining laser directly into the cruiser's bridge section. The Valorian ship reeled from the unexpected attack, its shields designed to protect against long-range weapons fire, but not prepared for a point-blank cutting beam that had been designed to slice through solid rock on the Eternal Dominion. Admiral Kethvar watched his perfect battle plan disintegrate into chaos. They're using our own debris against us, Threx reported. Our drone losses are at 40% and climbing. The heavy bombardment wings have achieved less than 5% hit rate. The humans are not fighting like any species we have encountered. There is no organization, no coordination, no predictable pattern. Kethvar's frustration boiled over. Then we stopped trying to predict them. Order all ships to close to knife fight range. If we cannot hit them at distance, we will overwhelm them up close. All vessels, full advance. Saturate the combat zone with firepower. I want so many weapons firing that they cannot possibly evade them all. The Valorian fleet surged forward, abandoning their elegant formations in favor of aggressive close-quarters combat. It was exactly what Captain Chun had been waiting for. They're taking the bait, she announced. Dr. Harrison, activate the WASP virus's secondary function. Let's show them what happens when their fleet network becomes their worst enemy. Aboard the research station Galileo, Dr. Harrison entered a command sequence. The WSP virus which had been introducing small delays and errors into Valorian systems, suddenly escalated its sabotage. Targeting computers began misidentifying Fren. The battle had been raging for 7 hours, and the space around Earth had become a graveyard of shattered vessels. From both fleets, debris tumbled through the void sections of Valorian hull plating, human cargo containers, frozen atmosphere, and the broken bodies of warriors from two species who had underestimated each other in different ways. Admiral Kethvara stood alone on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, staring at tactical displays that told a story he refused to accept of the 200 vessels he had brought to conquer Earth. 63 had been destroyed, and another 41 were too damaged to continue fighting. The human fleet had been reduced from its initial strength as well. But the survivors continued to fight, with the same insane determination they had shown from the beginning. This cannot be happening. Kethvara whispered. They are primitives. They fly scrap metal held together with adhesive tape. How are they doing this? Commander Threx, his uniform torn and stained with ichor from a hull breach that had killed 3 bridge officers, approached cautiously. Sir, we need to withdraw. The fleet is compromised. Our tactical network has been corrupted by their virus. Ships are firing on each other. We have lost operational cohesion. Kethvara's eyes blazed with fury. The Valorian Empire does not retreat from primitive species. We have conquered 47 worlds. We will not be defeated by the 48th. He turned to his communications. Officer, prepare the Eternal Dominion for Kamikaze Protocol. We may have lost this battle, but we will not lose this war. If we cannot conquer Earth, we will destroy it. Plot a collision course directly for their homeworld. Emergency power to engines and forward shields. We will take humanity's planet with us. Threx's face went pale. Sir, that is suicide. We have thousands of crew aboard this vessel. Your legacy is already written. Commander, Kethvara replied coldly. The question is whether it ends with the shame of retreat or the honor of taking our enemy with us. All hands, abandon ship. Senior officers and volunteers remain. We have one final strike to deliver on the Indomitable's bridge. Captain Chun watched her sensor displays with exhaustion-dulled eyes. The human fleet had fought beyond all expectations, but they were running on fumes and desperation now. Reactor cores were overheating, ammunition was nearly depleted, and crews had been fighting without rest for 7 hours. Then the alarm screamed. Captain, the Valorian flagship is accelerating. The tactical officer shouted. Course plotted directly for Earth. They're going to ram the planet. Chun felt ice flood her veins. A ship the size of the Eternal Dominion, moving at full acceleration, would hit Earth's atmosphere with kinetic energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons, even if it broke apart on entry. The debris would cause catastrophic damage. Entire cities could be wiped out. The climate could be destabilized. Everything they had fought to protect would be destroyed. Intercept course, she ordered. Emergency power to engines. We stopped them or die trying. Dr. Webb's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, our reactors are already at critical load. If we push them any harder, I know. Marcus, Chun interrupted, but if that flagship reaches Earth, none of this matters. Give me everything we have left. The Indomitable shuddered as its battered engines pushed beyond their rated capacity. Coolant systems that had been jury-rigged and patched a dozen times began to fail. Temperature warnings flashed across every engineering console, but the ship accelerated, moving to intercept the Valorian flagship on its suicide run. Chun opened fleet-wide communications. All vessels, this is Chun. The enemy flagship is attempting to ram Earth. Indomitable is moving to intercept any ship with weapons or engines still functional. Support as able. To everyone else, it's been an honor. across the scattered human fleet. Damaged vessels fired their remaining thrusters, trying to reach attack positions. Cargo containers with single missiles left launched them toward the Eternal. Dominion escape pods fired their personal weapons, knowing the shots would do nothing but wanting to contribute something to the final defense of their world. The Indomitable closed with the Valorian flagship, and both ships opened fire. Chen's vessel was already running on failing systems, held together by emergency patches and the sheer determination of its crew. The Eternal Dominions weapons tore into it like a beast savaging prey hull. Sections peeled away, compartments vented. The space crew members died at their stations as bulkheads collapsed and fires consumed entire decks, but Chun kept her ship on course. Absorbing damage meant to stop her, trading her vessel and her crew for the chance to stop Kathvara's final desperate gambit. "Captain, we've lost main power," Webb reported, his voice barely audible over the sounds of destruction. "Switching to emergency batteries. Reactor 3 is in meltdown. We need to evacuate." "Not yet," Chun replied. "Get everyone off the ship except essential bridge crew. Marcus, that includes you. Get to the escape pods. What about you?" "I'm staying with my ship until the job is done," Chen said quietly. "Now go." "That's an order." Webb hesitated, then saluted and ran for the evacuation stations across the Indomitable. Crew members abandoned their posts and fled to escape pods, leaving behind the vessel that had been their home and fortress on the bridge. Chun stood with 5 volunteers who had refused to leave her tactical officer, her helmsman, her communications specialist, and 2 engineers who insisted someone needed to keep the emergency systems running. "Bring us alongside the flagship," Chun ordered. "Make it look like we're dead in space. One more trick before we're done." The Indomitable tumbled, venting atmosphere and debris, its engines dark and silent. It drifted on momentum alone. Passing within kilometers of the Eternal Dominion, Kathvar watched the human flagship drift by. Apparently destroyed, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human captain had been brave, but ultimately futile. Nothing would stop his final blow against Earth now. "Continue. On course," he commanded. "Prepare for atmospheric entry in 3 minutes." On the Indomitable's darkened bridge, lit only by emergency lights and the glow of a single active console, Captain Chun made peace with her decision. "Marcus, if you can still hear me on the emergency channel, I need you to know the crew did everything I asked and more. Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them we bought them a future." She turned to her remaining crew. "Last trick. People, activate the experimental warp drive." The helmsman's hand shook as he entered the activation sequence. "Captain, this has never been tested. We don't even know if it will work. And if it does work, the spatial distortion will tear both ships apart at the atomic level." "I know," Chun replied. "But if we don't try, Earth dies anyway. So we're gonna do what humans do best. We're gonna try something insane and hope it works. Activate on my mark." She watched the distance between the Indomitable and the Eternal Dominion. Close to optimal range, the human ship appeared dead. Drifting, harmless, the Valorian flagship continued its suicide run toward Earth. "Now less than 2 minutes from atmospheric entry. Mark," Chum said quietly. The helmsman activated humanity's most dangerous invention, a weaponized warp drive that human engineers had designed not for faster-than-light travel, but as its final desperate weapon. Instead of creating a stable warp bubble around a ship, it created a directional spatial tear, the fabric of reality itself, ripped open between the Indomitable and the Eternal Dominion. Kathvar had one moment to realize what was happening before the universe came apart around him. The spatial tear caught the Valorian flagship, and the ship existed simultaneously in normal space and Subspace physics rebelled against the impossibility. The Eternal Dominion did not explode, it dissolved atoms, separated from molecules. Molecules separated from each other. And the mighty flagship that had led the conquest of 47 worlds simply ceased to exist in any coherent form. The cascade effect propagated through the Valorian tactical network. Every ship still connected to the flagship's command systems experiencing catastrophic failures as their computers tried to process data from a vessel that no longer existed. The spatial tier began to collapse. And the Indomitable, positioned at ground zero of the reality-breaking weapon, came apart as well. Captain Chen felt her body begin to disintegrate, atoms separating. Consciousness fading. Her last thought was a prayer that Earth would survive. Then there was only light and silence, and the cold mathematics of physics reasserting itself over space that had been temporarily broken. The remaining Valorian fleet, now without their flagship, without their admiral, and with their tactical network in complete collapse, faced a choice. They were still superior in numbers and firepower to the battered